Welcome to Behind the Badge. This podcast is about the frontline community, its people, their experiences, and the impact of service life. Each episode brings candid conversations around resilience, well-being, and navigating the unique challenges of high-risk roles. Some discussions may be emotionally challenging. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Mark Mcconville.
Thanks for having me, boys. Pretty good to see you.
Yeah, long time no see.
Yeah, it has been a long time no see, Jason Anderson. I mean, serious. I was trying to figure out how long it's been, and I reckon I would have been, maybe 20, which is 35, 36 years ago.
Wow.
Back at the Albany Creek Tavern, mate, back in the day.
The day.
Oh, yeah. Jason took over the drumming of the band that I was in because it turns out I was a pretty shit drummer.
He remembered.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I was a pretty shit drummer, mate. No, I actually learned to play the guitar from the guys in the band, and I still play the guitar now because it turns out a lot better on the guitar than I was behind the kit.
Oh, good stuff.
Sounds like that's etched into the memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's,
What's that red dot on my chest?
lot more enjoyable playing the guitar when you know what you're doing.
It is.
Oh, mate.
So, we are.
Let's get into it. Mark Mcconville, you are Australia's only comedian and suicidologist.
That's it. Yeah.
Let's park that for a minute.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about who Mark Mcconville is. Talk about your upbringing and apart from, getting kicked out of the band by Jason.
Oh, no. I didn't get kicked. It was voluntary, mate. I was out. There was no way. As soon as he sat behind the drums, I was like, well, that's my career over. Yeah.
So, mate, Albany Creek is where you grew up?
Yeah. Very lucky, I reckon, to grow up in Albany Creek at the time we did, because it was, half an hour or so out of North Brisbane, and back then it was very rural, and it was just it was one of those suburbs that was just starting to find its own feet, and the schools were new, the shopping centre was new, all of that sort of stuff, and you'd come home after school. It was one of those times where you'd come home after school, get changed, jump on your push bike, and the rule was in our house, as long as you were home before the street lights came on, you were good, and we went exploring, and we were so lucky back then, So, yeah, very, very good memories of that time.
I sort of wonder how often kids get to do that these days, just get home, get on your bike and don't come back.
Yeah, well, look, I'm sure it happens in rural areas like what we had, but in a city, probably not.
Well, they don't pedal anymore. They just jump on and press the
Yeah.
throttle and away they
There'd
go.
be an app. Right? I guarantee you. There's an app.
Yeah.
There'll be an app.
They're all in e-bike gangs now.
Yeah.
Oh my God, have you seen them?
Oh.
Hey, and here's the thing, right? Like I was chatting to a mate of mine about this the other day, and you see on the news, they're cracking down on e-bikes, and they've got all of these e-bike gangs, and what the footage is, they're flying around on these things, and a mate of mine, we were saying the other day, there is no way in the world we wouldn't have been all over that shit when we were 16. You
Bring
know
it
what
on.
I mean? I mean, if I had one of those things when I was 16, I would have been doing the exact same stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We only had the pegs and the cardboard to make it sound like a
Yeah, that's right.
motor vehicle.
Yeah, that's right. Loved it.
Mate, all growing up, at what point did you know you were going to head into comedy? Were you always the funny guy at school?
Yes.
Oh, mate, it was.
Yes.
I never set out to be a comedian. That was never on my radar. A lot of people ask comics. Were you always a funny kid at school and all that sort of stuff? And for me, I got bullied a bit at school and stuff. And I think a lot of comics have got a similar kind of thread that you learn very quickly that if you're funny, you're a bit of a novelty, right? And kind of people leave you alone, or you just make people laugh, and it makes everything easier. But being a comic, was never on my radar. Left school when I was in grade 10, didn't finish high school, went and worked on the tools in an engineering factory for 4 years, doing boiler making and welding and stuff, and that's a shit job being a welder. And And then I went out of that and became a sales rep in the building industry, selling timber to builders pretty much all through the 90s. And it was one of those things that I had a bit of a midlife meltdown at the ripe old age of 28. And it was one of those things that from the outside, everything was going great. You know, had a nice girlfriend, we were living in a nice house, had a company car, had a good job, you know, sales manager by that point, was, you know, I was playing golf every Thursday. Everything was great, but I was just so unhappy, you know, and I didn't know why. It was weird. I had a good bunch of mates and all that sort of stuff. And I just, as good as what it was, there was something inside me that felt that my life was destined to be something other than that, you know. So I ended that relationship, and, you know, went to live by myself out at Strathpine. And then it was one of those things that I thought, oh, well, what am I doing? What do I want to do? You know, and I thought I always wanted to be an actor, right? I always pictured myself as a bit of a, you know, Robert De Niro gangster type. You know, I always kind of thought that'd be pretty cool. So I found an acting school which was ticked a lot of boxes for the kind of stuff that I was interested in, method acting and all that, a bit of Shakespeare and all that. So I was kind of interested in that. So I thought, I'm going to audition for this, because at the time in 1998, it was called the National Actors Conservatory back then, and they did 2 intakes a year of 14 people, and so I auditioned and got in, and that was a 3-year method acting course. And so basically that was the start. And then about 6 months into the acting course, they did put on like a cabaret show for the students to perform in for friends and relatives and that sort of stuff. So it was Hamilton Town Hall, April 26, 1998 is the date. And that's my anniversary date from doing stand-up. Most comics will tell you they know their date, the first day they ever did it. And like I said, I never set out to do comedy. It was just one of those things that I was looking at everything that was happening on the night when they were planning the night. And I was like, oh, it's all drama. You know, like it's all drama and soliloquies and stuff. And the guy organising it said, oh, you want to get up and tell a few jokes, do you, Mcconville? And I was a bit of a class clown rooting around in the acting school, and I went, yeah, sure, why not? You know, so they said, how long do you want? And I said, 10 minutes. And I went, yeah, why not? Not realising that, you know, 10 minutes when you're brand new it's an eternity, right? Sunday night, April 26, 98, I got up, Hamilton Town Hall in Brizzy to about 90 people, and told a few jokes, told a few old stories and stuff. Everyone laughed at the right bits. And then when I went into the acting school on the Wednesday night, they've got all photos in the foyer of the acting school, all these arty black and white photos of everyone that performed on the Sunday night. And there's a photo of me standing there holding a microphone, and I'm looking at it going, how funny is that? I look like a comedian in this photo, right? And which I still I have this photo in my office at home. And then the dean of the school came out, Marcus Hogan, and he said, I thought I heard you out here. I want to speak to you in my office, you know. And I'm thinking, I'm in the shit. I've done something. I've upset someone. I've said something I shouldn't have done. And he said, when you auditioned to come into the acting school, you never mentioned anything about being a comedian. How long have you been doing stand-up for? And I said,
what's time now?
Fucking 10 minutes, mate, 10 minutes, right? And he said, well, I'm telling you now, that's your thing. Like, I'm so grateful to him to have that vision of what I could do. And he said, that's clearly your thing, mate. He goes, so stick with the acting school, because this is really going to help your comedy career. And comedians make great actors. And he said, but you need to start to pursue a career in stand-up. And so I started to, do open mics and all that sort of stuff. And the comedy scene in Brisbane in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot different to what it is now. There was only a couple of venues, and you had to be good to get spots, you know. So So I was very lucky that I had a few comics take me under their wing and guide me. And, you know, I think the best advice I got given was ditch the red shoes and write some jokes, mate. You know, you'll do all right at this, Greg Sullivan. And so I did everything that was asked and got better. And then by the time I graduated from the acting school in 2001, I was getting paid work as a comedian, doing support spots and getting the occasional tour down in Sydney and Melbourne, because I'd made friends with some of the Sydney and Melbourne comics when they'd come through to Brisbane to do their gigs, and got to be mentored by a few of those guys. And then they'd go back to Sydney or Melbourne and say, you know, there's this guy up in Brisbane, you should get him down here to do some gigs. And that's kind of how it all really took off.
Yeah,
you
good.
know? But yeah, never set out. And the crazy thing about it is that any acting gigs that I end up getting, not once did I ever get to be a gangster or a bad guy, right? I was like an army guy. I was like a a police officer, a detective. You know, I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, so I haven't done any professional acting work for a long time.
Mate, that's awesome. With the stand-up stuff at that time, was there an alternative, like a school or somewhere to go and learn that stuff, like there was for acting, or is it just learning off mentors and people giving you the hot tips on what to do?
Yeah, not really back then. Now there's professional comics that teach stand-up, you know, and they do a great job of it. A dear friend of mine, Fiona McGarry, runs a stand-up comedy course in Brisbane, does a fantastic job. But back then it was basically just listening to the advice that was given to you by the pro comics. And I was very lucky that I was mentored by some of the best comics in the country that you probably never heard of, you know, and it was all about laughs per minute. You're on stage for a certain amount of time, give them as much funny as you can. And the advice that even now I give to young comics is, you know, record everything that you do. Back then I was recording things on a little mini disc, right? Yeah. But now there's phones on tripods everywhere now, and just listen to it. Don't watch it, just listen, and you can very quickly hear where you're getting a laugh, what's working, what's not working, and so you basically, you get your 5 minutes. You get 5 minutes of 5 minute time slot when you first start out, and open mics are brutal, you know, because they're. You know, sometimes it's not a comedy club, you're in a pub somewhere or whatever, and you're doing these 5 minute spots for free. And like I did probably three gigs a week for maybe about a year and a half before I got my first paid spot. And then I remember getting paid $50 to do 10 minutes, and I'm like, fuck, I've made it. You know, like. And so, but then once you get consistent, once you get those laughs consistently, they know that every time you get up there, you're going to smash it out. Every 5 minutes that you do, then they go, well, let's give him 10 minutes. Yep. Right? And so then what you do is you get your 5 minutes that's working, you split it in half, do your 2.5 at the start, 2.5 at the end, and you put your new stuff in the middle. And then you spend another 6 months or however long building that 10 minutes until the point that it works every single time in front of every audience. And then they go, let's give him 20. And then you split your 10 up, and that's how you build a headline set, which is, 40, 50 minutes. But now, this is my 28th year of doing stand-up, and I've worked it out, I've probably got around 3.5 hours rolling around in my head that I can pull on, that I've built over the years. And you'll never get to do that in one hit, because you're getting booked to do, a 20-minute spot here or a 40-minute spot there. Even when I spent 16 years working on cruise ships doing gigs, and even that you're doing a 1 hour show, so even then you're not getting everything out.
Does that mean, like, Jace, if you're continually developing that, you sort of got a single style that you sort of find yourself in over your career, or do you chop and change and dabble in different?
I've always been one to I purposely don't talk about anything that's in the news, or politics or that sort of stuff. It's one of those things that I think it's important that there are comedians out there that do challenge the political landscape and do, make fun of the fact that the world's in a pretty weird place, but I take the piss out of reality TV and relationships and all that sort of stuff, and just have people forget about all their headaches, hassles and dramas and bills and whatever. And I'm a storyteller, like I like to tell stories about funny shit that's happened to me or people that I know. And what I will generally do, like, mate, there's so many great writers of comedy, and I consider myself not one of them. I'm not a writer. Like, I know comics that are so good at it. You could sit them in a room and say, write a joke about that table, and you can come back in half an hour time and they'll have 2 or 3 jokes and it'll all be great. I've never had that skill. It's like the breakfast radio guys. You have comedians on breakfast radio and they're writing material on a daily basis, So for me, it's kind of, I'll go months without anything new coming up, and then something will happen. I'll see something happen, and then I'll find a way to work that into my set. And so for me personally, what I'll do is I will, if it's a funny story or something that's happened, I will weave it into a conversation with people that don't know I'm a comic. There's a lot to be said for anonymity, when it comes to doing stand-up. And so I'll just weave it into a conversation with 2 or 3 different groups of people that don't know I'm a comic. And if I can get a laugh out of total strangers in just a conversation telling this story or whatever, I can pretty much know that that's worthy, that I'll be able to find a way to put that on stage. And by that time, I've also found where the laughs are, find the timing of telling the story, what the rhythm is of telling that yarn sort of thing. And yeah, there's actually a lot more to it than meets the eye doing stand-up, but sitting there writing jokes has never been my forte.
It's I find that really interesting. Like you said, there's a lot more that goes into it in the preparation, because all we see is the polished product usually up on stage and pissing ourselves laughing over it. But yeah,
comedians, we learn from the gigs that we die in the arse.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things that if you're up on stage and you're nailing it and you walk off stage and you go, oh man, you've just had 1,000 people in the palm of your hand for an hour. It's like, fuck, how good am I going? Whereas the ones that when you're first starting out, like I'll give you an example of how this has happened to me when I first started. Back in the day, we had the Sit Down Comedy Club was down at Snug Harbour, and it was a big deal to get a gig there on a Friday and Saturday night. And I went in there one night to do my 20-minute set, and on the Friday night, and I died in the arse. The first night I killed, right? The Friday night I went great. And then the Saturday night I went in there to do the exact same set and I died in the arse. And I remember saying to one of the comics, Mike Van Acker, great Brisbane comic, so helpful over the years. I said to him, man, what happened? I don't know. And he goes, how many people were here last night? And I said, I don't know, maybe it was full. It was like 150 people. And he goes, how many people are here tonight? And I said, it's pretty quiet. It's maybe about 40 or 50 people. He goes, yeah, but you performed to 150. And he said, and you came out with that energy of performing to it, and the audience just sat back and shit themselves in like, fucking hell, this guy's pretty full on. So, and that led me to looking at the training that I was getting in the acting school. They talk about method acting and stuff. You talk about energy in scenes, and people have got an energy, and you look at it on a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being no energy like a sloth, 7 being manic and full on flat out, and number 4 is neutral in the middle, right? And so as a comic, when you're on stage, you don't come out at 7 and you're not at 7 the whole time. Like I like to kind of sit in the room at the back of the room before I'm getting on stage and feel what the energy of the room is, and then I can kind of match that energy when I come out. So if it's like a 4, and then I can take them up to a 7, bring them back to a 2, bring them up to a 5, and match that energy. So yeah, there's so much more to it than just standing there and talking shit. You know.
What about when you get up? Like I think about it, getting up. If I had to get up and do a stand up, I think it would be the most nerve-wracking thing to do, because you're waiting for that. if your first joke doesn't land,
Mm.
what's your thoughts and how do you pick up from that? Like, is it like, okay, that didn't go down? Does that give you an automatic bit of this audience is going to be tough?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And that's the thing is that nervousness, it never leaves you. Even now, after doing it as long as I've been doing it, because what happens is you get to the point where I know what I'm capable of doing, and the audience is always the unknown factor. So it's less probably nervousness and more like an anxious anticipation of what is about to happen. And so when you come out onto stage, you're right, Chase, you hit that mark and you get that first laugh, and it's like, I got to tell you, it's one of those things that I've tried explaining it over the years, and the best way I can put it is when I'm on stage and I get that first laugh and I start motoring along, I feel at peace, and I feel like I'm exactly where I am doing exactly what it is I'm meant to be doing,
Is it because you're obviously with your own talent, you're happy with that performance side of things, but is it because you're changing someone's night or day? If they're laughing, you're giving them a good experience, and that's what you want, is someone to, if they've come in down and, depressed or whatever, and you can put a smile on their face. I know it's a cliche, but is that why you do it?
Well, yeah, it's there's been a shift in my mentality in relation to, what I get out of it, like you say, because for the first 15 odd years of my career was just all about stand up, doing jokes and all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't until when I shifted gear and started to, it was the turning point. My entire life had a turning point in 2012 when I was on a cruise ship, and I tell this story in my Laughter Clinic mental health presentations where I go, how is it that a stand-up comedian came to work in the field of mental health and suicide prevention? And so it was a random encounter with two audience members that changed the entire course of my life. So it was 2012. I'm doing a gig on the Pacific Jewel for P&O. It's a late night show, 1 hour R-rated. And I did the gig, had a good time. And then after the gig, I'm just sitting at the bar watching everyone filing out of the theatre. And I noticed this couple kind of come over to me. And, comedians were pretty approachable. People want to come up to you after a gig and, loved it, mate, had a great time, needed a laugh, whatever. But the closer this couple got, I could see that the lady was crying. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And, mate, every time I remember this story, it takes me back to this night because I'll never forget it. She came up to me and she just wrapped her arms around me. And she said, I don't know how I can possibly thank you because I have not seen my husband laugh out loud for 3 years.
Wow.
And I'm just like, how is that possible? How is that? How on earth is that possible? And so I ended up talking to this couple for pretty much nearly 5 hours after that. And so, because I wanted to know what's going on, And it was so, and he's standing there, and here's this guy saying to me, mate, you have, he's a veteran, right? It turned out this guy's a veteran. This is 2012, 2009. He was in Afghanistan. He was conducting a patrol, kicked open a door, booby trap, blew him up, right? And so, and here's this guy standing in front of me going, mate, I've got to tell you, you've done more for me in one night than 3 years of counselling and post-traumatic stress management and whatever else, because you've just made me laugh for an hour. I will say I was pretty funny that night. It was a cracking gig from memory. And his wife was pissed off at the fact that she goes, why is it that for the last 3 years the people looking after my husband's rehabilitation and his mental health at no point had stopped to go, you're still able to laugh, you still find things funny, you still access your sense of humour, you still get joy in your life. And so I got off the ship and I could not stop thinking about this couple, and so I started to do a little bit of research into, the age-old saying, laughter is the best medicine, and, I'm approaching it from a comedian's point of view, and and led me to looking at how laughter and humour affects depression and anxiety and PTSD, and then that led me to, the rates of stress, anxiety and depression in society, and then the rates of suicide and attempted suicide. And then by the time I got to those figures, I was like, wow, this is quite a big problem, a significant problem that I dealt with my own depression and stuff, but I had no idea the extent of the problem in society. So I thought, well, I work in an industry that can clearly have a positive impact here, given what had happened with this guy on the cruise ship. Because my personal belief is that, everybody should be able to go to a comedy club on a Friday night, pay $30 for your ticket or whatever, and then take your receipt to Medicare and get a refund, right? And that's closer to, I've got a whole other thing happening with that. But so one thing led to another, and I had a business mentor that I said, I want to create this formal link between the comedy industry and mental health. He said, you're just a comedian with a cool idea at the moment, mate. You've got to get a university involved to do research into this. So we're very lucky in southeast Queensland, Griffith University. We've got the Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention, one of 5 places in the world that is on the World Health Organization Collaborating Committee for Suicide Prevention. So we went in there, had a meeting with the then director, Professor Diego DeLeo, and he said this is quite a unique approach to suicide prevention using humour and laughter therapy and education. We think you should come and study the master's degree in suicidology, right? And I've I remember going at the time, sure, how hard can that be, right? Not realising, because I don't know anything about university, not realising that a master's degree is a postgraduate degree, so you've got to have a degree to qualify. And then when I found that out, I rang him up and I said, look, I appreciate it, but I'm not your guy. Clearly, I don't qualify for this. I'm, welder, sales rep, comedian, I've left school when I was 14, let alone go to uni. So I'm not your guy. And they said, well, we actually think you are the guy, mate. So we'll give you whatever support you need and help guide you through learning how to learn. And at the ripe old age of 45, I started university for the first time in my life at a postgraduate level and did a grad cert in suicide prevention studies and got a high enough score to qualify to go through and do the master's degree. So 3.5 years it took me to get the master's in suicidology. And while I started uni, that was when I went, well, I'm going to do something with this, obviously. So that's when I built the Laughter Clinic, keynote presentations, and using my academic knowledge in mental health and suicide prevention. And so for my thesis, I designed a humour and laughter education program specifically for people with stress, anxiety and depression, ran a pilot study, got great results, so I've pretty much been travelling around the country doing that ever since, talking to everyone from little men's sheds and community groups right up to big mining companies and hospitals and universities and all that sort of gear. But first responders and defence personnel, I've got a real, passion for helping you guys out, because to me that's where it all started. That was my origin story, as the guy on the cruise ship. And the more that I looked into it, the more similarities I saw between defence and first responders in relation to, PTSD. And now we've got the new field of study in relation to moral injury, which is a big thing as well. And so I know that's a long answer to your thing, Jason, but that thing about giving something to the audience, knowing it's one of those things that now I appreciate the fact that you never know who's in your audience, and what they've been going through. And I'm constantly saying it to other comics, you never know who's there and what shit they've been dealing with and what have you. And if you can have them walking out, having had a good time and had a laugh, and, mate, there's that story about the guy on the cruise ship. For me, there's so many comics that have had moments like that. People coming up I lost my brother recently. I've lost a family member recently. I've lost a pet recently. I haven't been out of the house for weeks, and I've been dragged out, and this was the best. And you forget the power of not only laughing, but now I appreciate the fact that humour and laughter hits the 3 domains of health. You know, that saying laughter is the best medicine only scratches the surface, because you've got the physical benefits of laughter, what happens physically, you know, and then you've got the psychological benefits of using your sense of humour as a coping mechanism, which is one of the most powerful things for you guys, for first responders. You know, there's a thing called self-enhancing humour, which is, you know, some people call it dark humour or gallows humour or whatever, but I have a full appreciation now of the importance of you guys being able to use your sense of humour in the course of your duties, you know. And then you've got the social health aspects of people coming together and sharing a laugh. And, you know, if you've ever been in a comedy club and you're there laughing your ass off with 300 strangers or 1,000 people, or even if you've been at the pub with your mates and you're all having a laugh, social health is so important, you know, and sharing a laugh with your mates, fuck, it really ticks that box too, you know.
Do you think that's changed? Like, I remember you'd always go, you know, you might go to the pub and there'd be someone telling a joke and there's 20 people around and hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
But how often now do you hear someone go, hey, did you hear about the, and they'll go into a joke. It's what we read now, or memes, or I don't see a lot of that, no one telling jokes anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if the social media's made that impact on that, but
I'd had 100% it would have, Jace, for sure. And I actually had a comedian mate of mine on the Laughter Clinic podcast, quick plug, Laughter Clinic podcast, check it out, a few weeks ago, and David Smeet is his name, and he was talking about his old man having a love of jokes, you know, and you're right, you know, there was that time where you'd all be standing around at a party or a pub or whatever, and everyone would have a crack, and you'd be waiting for your turn because someone would tell a joke and it would remind you of, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to get this one out, you know.
Yeah.
And now it's like the modern day equivalent of that is probably, you know, I saw this meme the other day, check this out, or have a look at this AI thing with these cats playing the piano or whatever.
Yeah.
It's different. It's so different.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that ability to tell a joke and make someone else laugh is so good for you. Like, you know, there's research to actually show that generating humour is more psychologically beneficial than appreciating it. So when I'm on stage as a comedian doing my gig, as much as the audience is getting a kick out of it, I'm actually getting a better hit out of it. And so if you've ever told a joke, you know, and had someone laugh, that feeling that you get because you've created a bonding relationship, you've made someone else's day by making them laugh, it's good for your self-esteem and your self-worth and your quality of life and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I'm forever saying go forth and be funny.
Just on that.
Have you guys got a couple of good jokes? Have you got some jokes?
Oh, God, under pressure.
Under pressure. Can I tell you a joke that I tell people? Right, this is my gift. Right, when I do the Laughter Clinic presentations, I say, here's a joke that you can tell your friends, tell your family, and it starts weird, but it ends strong. You got to trust me on this, right? So here we go. So remember this joke. For those listening, remember this, right? So here's a, and it's not mine. I just want to say I didn't write this joke. I heard it in New Zealand last year, and I thought, wow, that's a cracker. Little old man in a car park reverses his car out into a guy in a ute. Guy in the ute jumps out. He goes, you drove into my car, little old man. I want $2,000 or I'm going to bash you. And the little old man goes, oh, shit, I don't have $2,000. And the guy in the ute's going off. He goes, well, mate, I want my money. And the little old man goes, I'll call my son. My son's a dolphin trainer. He'll know what to do, right? And the guy in the ute goes, I don't give a shit what he trains, mate. I want my $2,000, right? So the little old man rings his son. Guy in the ute rips the phone out of his hand and he goes, your little old man, Dad, drove into my truck. I want $2,000. And the son goes, all right, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Well, bring $2,000 or I'm going to bash the pair of you. All right, no worries. So 20 minutes later, the son rocks up, right? And he kicks the shit out of the guy in the ute, kicks the absolute shit out of him. And he turns to his little old man dad and goes, "Little old man dad, how many times have I got to tell you this? I do not train dolphins. I train seals, Navy SEALs."
Pretty appropriate for the podcast.
Yeah, I know. Like, who thought of that? Like, I mean, that's a great play on words. I wish I could take credit for it, but no, it's not me.
I like it.
But it's a cracker.
And we just don't hear him anymore. It's
Yeah, I know, right?
wow.
Yeah, everyone's showing someone a meme.
Mate, just before you told us that joke, you talked about getting that hit yourself.
That hit.
That hit.
That hit.
That hit. Getting that hit yourself from telling jokes. What do you notice, I guess, mental health within the comedic profession? Is that, do you think healthy? Is there some problems there? Because I think, you know, there's some quite famous comedians who have struggled with their mental health.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
It's one of the biggest misconceptions about comics, I reckon. And I've asked this of other comics on the podcast, you know, what do you reckon the biggest misconception about being a comedian is? And they go, we're all depressed, you know. And yes, there's, you know, our demographic is probably no more susceptible to depression than anyone else. But the interesting thing with comics is we have a degree of resilience built that is honed from getting up on stage. And, you know, like, you think about it, when you really think about it, we're doing something that 99% of the population would go, fuck that. You know, standing on stage for an hour, and your job is to make 1,000 people laugh. You know, like, that's pressure. And if it doesn't work, like, when you get to the point that you're getting those type of gigs, you're good enough to make that work, right? But when you're starting out, you know, you're having nights where you're humiliating yourself in front of total strangers, and you go home and you just feel like shit, you know, you just want to crawl up in a ball and suck your thumb, you know, and then you find a way to pull yourself out of that funk and go, I'm going to go back tomorrow night into the same venue, walk past the same bar staff that saw me die in the arse the night before, and have another crack at it, you know. And so, yeah, the mental health side of things is we're built differently, I reckon, comics, when it comes to resilience, you know, because we find a way to work through that, the ones that get through to, you know, being full-time professional comics. And, yeah, the mental health side of it is, it's hard. It's a hard industry to, you know, try and make a living out of. A lot of comics do other things, you know, like, while I've been doing it for 28 years, you know, there were probably the first 10 years of my career I had a part-time job doing other things, you know, working in a hardware store. I worked at Dreamworld for a couple of years as an actor in the entertainment department. And so, you know, we're as susceptible as everybody else to the mental health side of things. You know, what is happening now is you're getting a lot of the younger comics coming through and talking about their mental health issues on stage. You know, like, you know, ADHD, or I'm bipolar, or I'm this, and there's two schools of thought, like, because I'm of a different ilk, because I started so long ago that was different, you know, whereas now it's harder to do stand-up now than what it was when I started, because of the fact that comedians are under a lot of scrutiny, you know, what we can and can't say. And I think it's a good thing that there's young comics that are out there that are brave enough to come and talk about their mental health issues on stage, because it takes courage to do that in front of a room full of strangers. But it's a cautionary tale that don't confuse it with being a therapy session. You know, your job on stage, respect the stage time, and you've got one job and one job only, and that is to make them laugh. You know, and so if you want to talk about, you know, your mental health conditions on stage, so be it. And it's good that, you know, it raises awareness and it's, you know, reducing stigma and all that sort of stuff, which is a great thing. But make no mistake, you know, it's not a therapy session. You've got to make them laugh.
Yep. What about, like, even in a social aspect, if you're not on, you know, on the clock or at work time, is there always that expectation, whether you're going, say you're going to a friend's gathering and people say, oh, you got to get Mark on, mate. He is so funny. He's going to make you laugh all night. And then, you know, is there a point where you don't want to be funny all the time? And if you're not in that headspace, you go to the party or wherever you are, is there an expectation that you have to almost perform to that network of friends? Because
not now. When I started, there was, you know, because it was so unique what I was doing amongst my group of friends, you know, and I used to joke about it, the fact that, like, you'd be at a party or a social situation and the intros were going around and it's like, you know, this is Jason, this is Josh, this is Wayne, this is Debbie, this is Mark, he's a comedian, this is blah, blah. And you're like, hey, whoa, hang on a minute.
yeah.
You know, why did I get that added? And so, yeah, not so much now, you know, because I can turn it on and off as I see fit.
Yep.
But I like making people laugh, you know. And one of the things about being a comic is, like, there's different styles of humour and it's all been studied to the nth degree and all this sort of stuff. And there's a thing that you can do called the Humour Styles Questionnaire, and you do a questionnaire and you get a score on these 4 different styles of humour, and 2 are positive, 2 are negative. You know, affiliative is making other people laugh. If you're that person at a barbecue, you got the snappy comments, or at the shops, you're cracking up the dude at the servo or whatever. That's a positive use of humour. Self-enhancing is what you guys use as first responders and defence personnel, using your sense of humour as a way to cope with some traumatic shit that you got to deal with on a daily basis. You know, and in psychological terms, it's one of the most highly rated coping mechanisms at your disposal is your sense of humour. And then the 2 negative ones are aggressive, laughing at the expense of someone else, and self-defeating, laughing at the expense of yourself. So comedians as such, you know, we score highly on the self-enhancing and the affiliative, because we like to make other people laugh. We know that it feels good for ourselves. But the thing is that, and this is the Australian sense of humour is so unique. The Australian sense of humour, we use aggressive humour and self-defeating humour positively. You know, we got such a unique sense of humour, the Australian sense of humour. The age-old saying, oh, mate, if we like you, we put shit on you, relax. You know, we don't mean anything by it. We're using it as a way of including you into our tribe. Or if we're at a party, say, social situation, and we don't know everybody, and, you know, because we'll put shit on ourselves as a way of kind of going, I'm no better than everybody, include me into your tribe kind of thing, you know. But, yeah, I very rarely, you know, get introduced as, you know, this is Mark, he's a comedian now. It's weird when, you know, you're at a party and someone goes, so what do you do for work? And depending on what mood I'm in, you know, depending on what mood I'm in and who I'm talking to, I'll either say I'm a comedian, you know, I'm a suicidologist, or I tell them I work in suicide prevention or mental health. You know, one of those 4 things they'll get, you know. And it's interesting that suicide prevention, mental health, you know, like that's usually the bit that goes, hang on a minute, comedian, suicide prevention, how does, and then some people will kind of look at you as if to go, tell me more, and other people will go, yeah, that makes sense.
Because I think if I heard that in the one sentence, you go, well, how does that work? Like,
yeah, are you making jokes about suicide?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like, which I get a lot. People say that a lot. And I'm like, no, I'm preventing it. You know, it's all about preventing suicide and mental and you know, educating people on the importance of how important it is to have our sense of humour. You know,
do you think society's trying to take that away?
Oh, we're in a different place now, man. We're in such a different place. You know, like, it's interesting. Jim Jeffries, very famous Australian comic, you know, living in the States, has done a fantastic job. I don't think anybody can analyse it as well as what Jim has when he talks about the cancel culture and all that sort of stuff. And you know, Jim talks about the fact that comedians, we know where the line is. You know, we know, and our job is to go up to the line. And sometimes inadvertently we'll go over it, but we know where the line is, right? And you've got people cancelling out comics or shows or whatever that, you know, like Jim said, he goes, when I did that routine, the line was here and I went up to the line. Society has moved the line backwards, not me.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't move the line backwards. You moved the line backwards. And so, you know, you can't get up me for telling a joke that 20 years ago when I wrote it, it was totally appropriate, you know. Whereas I know now things are different. You know, I wouldn't do that now, but you can't berate me for something that 20 years ago was
acceptable.
Yeah, like it's weird. You know, you look at just look at the TV shows that were on 25 years ago. You know, Kingswood Country, Love Thy Neighbour, you know, bloody Are You Being Served, all these sort of, really showing our age now, aren't we, boys? You know, Josh is there going, you little baby, you. He's probably there going, who are these guys talking about?
What's this show?
But it's, and I tell you what, in the corporate world where I do a lot of work, you know, outside of working for you guys, it's very, you know, particular. Like when I'm doing gigs for businesses, they you know, HR are very
Bless you.
Bless you.
edit.
Not a chance.
I got last year I got 6 emails over the space of 12 months from clients that I was going to do gigs for, stand-up gigs, with lists of things they didn't want me to talk about. And one of them I rang him up and I said, do you even want a comedian?
Yeah.
You know, because no matter what I say, you're going to sit there and judge me, you know. So corporate work's harder because you've got to be clean.
Yeah.
You know, comedy clubs are rated. You can, you know, go for your life. But in the corporate world, you got, like, I've done comedy gigs for, you know, 20 lawyers at 7 o'clock in the morning over breakfast. That's a tough gig, you know.
Do you think in the corporate world, deep down there, they're laughing, but it's all about that perception?
Is the boss laughing?
The boss just laughed at that joke. That's so offensive. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it would be so tough.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's, you know, what's very cool is and it's not just me, there's other mental health speakers around that are getting a lot of work in the corporate world, and because it's all about culture. You know, we're all about psychosocial risk factors in the workplace and all that sort of stuff. And you know, you want to make it about money, you know, like the Productivity Commission estimated that mental ill health costs the Australian federal economy between $45 and $70 billion a year in lost productivity. You know, and so you've got absenteeism and, you know, worker compensation claims, but there's a big chunk of it is in this thing called presenteeism, you know, which is basically people rocking up to work and being unproductive because they're struggling, you know, and staff turnover, you know, how much does it cost you to retrain someone and advertise for someone and fill a position, you know? So I think there's a shift in workplace culture happening at the moment where there's more of a focus on, you know, now we've got EAPs. I'm sure you guys have got EAPs, you know, and so making sure that your workforce is all right, you know, and it's up to training the leaders. You know, we were talking before, Jason, about making sure that the leaders of organisations are aware of what to look for in their staff, you know, and if someone's not, you know, doing their job properly or not being productive or they're making mistakes or something like that, instead of berating them, maybe, you know, doing a bit of a dive and go, you know, what's going on? Is something happening at home? Have you got personal shit going on? Like where are you at? and take a real proactive approach in making sure that the mental health of your workforce is all right. And all of the research shows the return on investment, like back in 2014 when PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study on this, they said for every dollar an organisation spends on a mental health initiative for their workforce, they'll get a return on investment of about, it was either $3.50 or $3.80. Fast forward to 2024 when the Productivity Commission did their findings, that now is up to like $5, $5.50, you know. It's pretty good return on investment for any organisation to bloody, you know, invest in your people.
What would that look like for you, Mark, noting that your comedic background, how and where would you invest your money, and how would you, I guess, bring the comedy into, I guess, advancing mental health?
Yeah. So I work with a fantastic guy on the Gold Coast, Stephen Woods, who runs an organisation called Employee Wellness Australia. And, you know, Stephen's got a lot of, when he goes into an organisation, he has a suite of products that he does. And one of the big things that they focus on is training their leaders to be good leaders, to recognise the best way to, you know, manage their staff. Because just, you know, it wasn't until he said it to me recently that I really made note of. He goes, just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're a leader. And there's a difference between managing, you know, logistics and timetables and budgets and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to leading people and recognising how to get the best out of your people. And so I think funding for leadership training is where I would start. And then have people like me come in to, you know, encourage humour and laughter in the workplace and encouraging a workplace culture of joy in the workplace. You know, like I've had a few clients recently where after me doing my session, now they have one organisation in particular said that, you know, they have a staff meeting every Monday morning. It's only a small organisation, about 15 people, you know, but every Monday morning they have a staff meeting and they talk about, you know, what they're doing for the week and what the goals are for the week and all this sort of stuff. And now every one of those meetings starts with an element of laughter. One person has the job for that meeting to bring along something that they found the previous week that's going to crack everyone up at the meeting, you know, and that's how they start, you know. So like, okay, we're all in for the sales meeting. Righto, Josh, what have you got?
I got a meme.
You know?
Have a look at my meme.
Something. Me. Tell some jokes, mate. And that's how they start their week, you know. And you know, the boss said to me recently, he goes, mate, he goes, you got no idea how something little like that has changed the fact that, and it takes not only leadership, but it takes awareness amongst the people in the organisation. And this is one of the big things that I talk about is understanding, and especially when I'm talking to first responders and defence personnel, is that not everybody shares your sense of humour, right? And especially in the workplace, right? And yet individually, as individuals, we all know within our social circle or in our work circle who we can and can't have a laugh with, you know. And that's one of the big things is, you know, for me, it comes down to three things. How do you, what makes you laugh? How do you bring more laughter into your life? How do you bring more laughter into the lives of those around you? But it all starts with what is it that you find funny? What is it that makes you laugh? And who is it that makes you laugh? The easiest way to bring more laughter into your life is spend more time with the people that you know, that you share a sense of humour with, and acknowledging the fact that not everybody's going to share your sense of humour. And when I'm talking to people in the workplace, it's like, you know, there's a big difference between emailing someone a link to something or, you know, sharing something on social media as opposed to waiting till you're actually with that person and go, hey, I saw this the other day, check this out, and you've got that connection. But you've got to pause before you share anything and just go, am I 100% confident that this person is going to find this funny? Do do I know that this is going to hit the mark? And if there's any degree of doubt, pause and err on the side of caution. And if you feel compelled to show them, well, wait until you're actually with the person, right? So then, if their reaction is bad, well, they'll give you a clip across the back of the head and go, fuck, you thought I'd find that funny? Whatever. But you got to err on the side of caution. But having an understanding of who is it in your life that you share that sense of humour with, like you guys have a sense of humour unto your, I'm sure amongst the emergency services personnel, the sense of humour with the fireys is different to the paramedics, different to the police, and yet within your own cohort, you all get it, because you've got that shared lived experience. In suicide prevention, we talk, everything now is all about lived experience. Listening to the voice of lived experience, and especially for you guys, because no one's going to understand what you guys go through. Only you do, and that's why I'm sure you guys have been doing it for long enough that you know that there's stuff that you can have a laugh with your mates at work about, and then, you got to kind of switch off that part of your brain, and, you're at a barbecue with your mates on a Saturday afternoon, and you get a few beers into you or whatever, and you start telling some yarns, and all of a sudden you've got one of your mates leaning in your ear going, "Hey, Japes, this is a bit fucking inappropriate, mate."
Yeah.
On that,
has that ever happened? I'm curious, like you guys, or do you have that? You've got to hone self-awareness now that it doesn't happen.
Because I like to use comedy at work with my crew. I just think that that's always been me. But yeah, what I've noticed is with different. Whether it's generations or younger crews coming in, I'm often checking, as in before I've said it, in here's going, is this person going to find that offensive, or so I'm very cautious on I've got to know my surroundings, know your tribe, like you said. But
so you guys went through your training in different eras, pretty much. Like, so when did you do yours, Josh?
96.
Josh?
10 years. 10 years ago.
10 years ago, right. So have you guys spoken about the differences in the induction and the train,
probably only through different podcasts that might come up in, or when I joined, or, so it's not really a...
Has there been a noticeable shift?
Yes.
It's always harder back in the day.
Always. we did it a lot tougher. They get it easy. But I think so.
Yeah.
In numerous ways. And it's just not with one emergency service. I think it's amongst, the whole group. The humour side of it has disappeared. Not totally, but it's not as,
When you say it's disappeared, are you referring to it's disappeared? Okay, so like I was talking to some police recently, and they said, "Mark, you got to understand that, mate, we're all wearing body cams now. I don't know if you guys do, but
not yet.
No, but they say as soon as we get out of the car, everything's being recorded, and so we can't be using our sense of humour to deal with something because if it finds its way into a court, we're screwed, Whereas we might in a position where you wait till you get back in the car, you turn the camera off or whatever, and then you can kind of have that debrief or that moment of kind of which you need, which is 100% need, And so when you say this sense of humour, are you talking about actually on the job, back in the station, whereabouts can you see it diminishing?
Certainly around the station.
Yeah.
It's still there, don't get me wrong, but it's not as, you go to I remember, to put it into perspective, we went on a camping trip, a group of fireys, and the whole time we are just absolutely laying it on, putting shit on each other. Yeah. And we had an outsider come with us.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there. You could see him looking across we were all sitting around the fire, and he's looking, and I went up to him later and I said, how you going, mate? You having a good time? He goes, how do you guys not get up and just punch the shit out of each other? I said, what do you mean? He goes, man, you just lay it on thick. And I went, but that's what we do, mate. And
Yeah.
by the end of the week, this guy was,
Yeah.
giving it as much as we were. But from an outsider's point of view, he was in shock that, and I didn't think it was, certainly wasn't inappropriate, but it was just, you had to have a thick hide to go away. And it was,
Yeah.
like you said
But
earlier,
that's the tribe knowing.
that's it. If you're getting shit put on you, you're accepted.
Yeah.
So you become one of the tribe.
Mm.
So that's disappeared, or that's lessened,
Yeah. Right.
in my opinion.
Do you think it's got something to do with, you were speaking before about Jim Jeffries and that line moving?
Oh, yeah. And
And-
we've not noticed a line moving. We've
Yeah.
gone to our normal line.
Or do you think now that humour's gone because that line's come back of what's acceptable, unacceptable, and like you said, reading the room and going, oh, where you'd normally tell that joke, maybe now with a different mix of generations and what's acceptable by society, people hold their tongue a little bit more or stop giving shit to that person or stop playing that prank on that person because they're worried about potential like repercussions.
And I think the time you think of all that, you've missed that spot. Look, you're a comedian. You've got to be bang. You've got to come in with that one-liner.
Mm.
If you think about that person in the front row, how they're going to you've missed your opportunity.
Yeah.
So, that sort of changes that dynamic. I think in all, we're all very good at respecting everyone's feelings and emotions. There's jokes and there's, bullying.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
There's got to be, whereas I think the change.
It's a maturity that understands the difference.
Yes. And that's where I think some of the change has been, is how different people decipher that. They go, are you having a go? You're bullying me? No, I'm not. So that's why I think a lot of people just tend to stand back,
err on the side of caution.
Go, I'll just be, me. And
so what about like we were talking about before? You're saying definitely around the station. Well, what about immediately after a job? Like when you guys are in the truck, you've just attended a fire or a motor vehicle fatality or something like that, and you've got a 20-minute drive back to the station. What about in that confined, closed environment where it's just half a dozen guys, men, women all together, half a dozen of you that have got that shared experience of what you've just been through, and you've got a 20-minute drive back to the station. What about there? Is there, because to me that would be
that's my prime.
Yeah,
that's when I want to, and I can do that with my current crew. I know my crew.
Yep.
But if I'm on a different shift, I'm not going out there. I'm just being reserved and, and again, it's not inappropriate stuff that I would say, but it's you've got to make light of a bad situation, in my opinion.
Yep.
I think that, you've seen something no one else will probably ever see or would want to see. And if you can turn that into and it's not directed at a person, it's directed potentially at a surrounding. It might be, did you see the dog on the footpath humping that other dog? Well, there's something happening here, bad analogy. But
well, you're putting emotional, because what we talk about is the reframing of something negative, to put emotional distance between you and that negative thing, right? To reframe something in a way that your brain can, process it. And, you're not putting a humorous spin on something incredibly horrific and tragic, obviously.
That's right. Or to that person directly involved.
Of course, 100%, And that's why, I often joke that nurses have probably one of the most finely tuned and brilliant sense of humour of anyone, any profession, because, they're seeing from the cradle to the grave and everything in between, and that's really, you've got to have a sense of humour to deal with it.
Another thing I find, and I'm pretty much on this, you'll go to a job and one of the jobs, it was a triple fatality in a house fire situation. Horrible job. And I just remember, obviously it was early morning, the street's full of media, it's, there's police, everyone everywhere. Walking back to the appliance, someone said something totally irrelevant to the job about, I think someone was reversing a truck back and having a laugh, about the way the person might have been reversing. 6 o'clock that night, I watched that footage, and the narration is, serious triple fatality, house fire, and you see 2 fireys walking up laughing, not laughing at the job, laughing at that small joke that. So I think there's.
That's pretty bad reporting, isn't it?
Well, and are they trying to catch us out? Don't think so, but that's the world we live in now, where everyone's a reporter, everyone's got a mobile phone,
everyone's got a camera, man.
So we're so cautious of that. When we're on the job, we're very mindful of, same as a copper with a body cam. So they're very cautious of what they say, and I think that's a big, So the in the truck is probably our safe space.
What about for you, Josh? When you were in the truck?
Yeah, same. Obviously, got to try and, like you touched on, Jace, it's about trying to maintain that professionalism, not only for the cameras, but I guess the people around and involved, because you don't want to seem insensitive on what is someone's potentially the worst day of their life. You don't want to be seen to be laughing and having that taken out of context, like your example. But once the doors are shut, that's all bets are off. We can, I guess, have a bit of a release and have a bit of a laugh and all that sort of stuff. And it's always. So is that is that a formal, is that a debriefing time? Or do you actually have a debriefing when you get back to the station? I'm assuming you guys have a debriefing after every event, yeah?
Yeah, I try and do a hot debrief at the job because I like to try and include QAS, QPS, whoever's on scene, just good job in that moment. Yep. And then something more formal when you get back to station with your crew and just, that check-in. But again, it's that, for me personally, it's that comedy side of things. I'll pick something out of the job and laugh at it, and I get a gauge then on, if everyone's laughing, okay, everyone's travelling okay. Or if they're not.
Are you guys as a unit pretty much working with the same group of people every shift, that you get to know each other's mannerisms and know each other's way of working and have a bit more attuned to see that one of your colleagues is not coping too well with something that's happened, as opposed to you're with a different group of people every job, and so you wouldn't know whether that person's struggling or not.
Because that's exactly right, because we've probably entered a real unique time at the moment with the fire service. A big influx of junior firefighters coming through, a lot of movements around. So Josh and I will move now to allow someone else to come in. So it is very transient. Although we are lucky enough that we might have our base network. It might be one or two going out here and there, and that's hard to catch or to form that relationship with the person that's moving around a bit. So, yeah.
Bit of both.
Yeah.
Bit of both. You've generally got a core group of a couple, and then the guys and girls floating around as well. So, yeah, like you said, though, it's tricky for the ones that are floating and moving and a bit more transient to get a beat on their mannerisms. But
you look at areas like New York Fire Department. That's a core group. You'll start as a junior fire on shift, and you'll end up on the same shift that you're 30 years down the track. They're very traditional. They'll all their stuff happens around the mess room table, and the laughs and the banter, and so they have that ability to get to really know people. And you are part of the family for that, the duration of your career. Whereas,
do you think that's something that would be a positive thing to implement in here?
Definitely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I understand the complexities behind that, with skill sets and things like that. There is a lot of movement for those reasons. I get that, and I think they do their best to keep that core group together. They really try to do that. So, who knows what's down the track with
because from an outsider's point of view, it would make sense that you're going to be more attuned to how the guys around you are going. If you're on the same shift with the same crew, for like a year, you're going to be pretty attuned to everyone's where they're at.
Well, what really, I thought about it the other day. I don't know why I thought about it, but I've been in the job 30 years. I'm 54. That's over half of my life. So I've spent a portion of my life with my family, friends, school, growing up. The rest of that has been with this family, 30 years with this family. And it's quite sort of, I never really thought about it for, any period of time, but I thought, hang on, and I think there's a catch to that as well. It's not, there's pros and there's cons. Like we spoke to a guest recently Tommy, and says, don't make that your only identity. Don't go to the barbecue. No one wants to, listen to the police stories or the, ambulance or fire stories at the barbecue. Don't forget the people that you first started out with, basically. And that's probably what got me thinking about that. 30 years is a long time to be in that tribe.
That is a long time. Do you think the, I know with the police that I've talked to recently, they've said that it's unlikely that police officers coming into the service now would be 30 years in the service. Like 5 to 7 years, I think is the average for the police now. What's your take on for the fireys? Do you think people coming in now?
I think it's a generational thing. I think guys maybe of your era are more likely to stay in jobs longer term, and I think the younger generations are more likely to shift and have more jobs throughout their career. But it's hard to tell with us because there's not a lot of attrition. Like not a lot of early attrition. But it'll be interesting to see over the next 5, 10, 15 years to see if people hang around or if they move on to other things.
Because I remember back in the day, it was like it was viewed as a job for life.
Yep.
From an outsider's point of view. And I know when I was a sales rep, I had builders who were fireys. One of my biggest customers, Rick White, was a.
Rick.
Are you serious? Rick? Yeah. Is he still building houses?
Oh, I haven't seen Rick in a long, long time.
Right.
But yeah,
you know who I'm talking about,
yes.
Right? So this is the 90s, and fiery. And when he's not doing that, he's building houses.
Yeah.
And it gave. Is there still that aspect of being able to have a career to do something else?
There is, but I think one of the reasons, I look back in sort of my era, everyone had a second job.
Okay, yeah.
Now conditions have improved over the years and money's got better, and so
was it a money thing that you needed that second job because of the wages back then, or was it because you had
bit of both.
So much time on your hands, you got to do something? And
you look at the recruitment around that era, it was first of all, it was what position do you play rugby league? You're a halfback. We need a halfback, so you'd fall through that door and or it was the trade background was seen as a they're practical people, they're
problem solvers,
and so that was very attractive. And I always wonder now, because I knew in my heart that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a firefighter, and ever since I remember going to Kemp Place as a kindy excursion and just being impressed by everything that was going on then. But I wonder now if it's another option for someone, the younger generation coming through. I can be this, I can be this, I can be a firefighter, I can do this, I can do this. I don't know if there's that real, I've got my heart set on the fire service, that's what I want to do, and that's the line I'm going to, take. I don't know, I don't want to sound like I'm being too hard on, but they get in and they go, it's okay, it's a job, which might work, as in, absorb all that sort of.
It doesn't strike me as a sort of career that you do because you go, it's a job. It's like certain professions, like you don't get into it for the money.
No.
You get into it because, like, especially in a position of service,
to help
the
people.
First responders, defense, like you get into it because you want to serve, you want to protect, help, be in a position to help people that can't help themselves. I think it's from an outsider's point of view, I get frustrated at the fact that there's so many private organisations out there that do the heavy lifting when it comes to looking after the mental health of you guys, you know. And, you know, because the way, at the end of the day, the governments, you know, whether it's local, state, federal, you know, we entrust you guys to look after our communities and our countries, and, you know, we hear that term duty of care, and I think it's the government has a huge duty of care to be responsible to look after you guys, and it frustrates me when I see, you know, funding cuts for mental health, or we're not doing this we're not going to fund that or whatever, and yet there's so many fantastic, like I'm involved with a few organisations outside, and the private sector, you know, like the private sector doing the heavy lifting when it comes to looking after you guys, which is, you know, it's wonderful that there are people out there that give a shit, that donate, are in a position to donate millions of dollars to big organisations that run programs for you guys and that sort of stuff. I think is brilliant. But it just frustrates me when I see how hard they've got to fight for money from government.
I think we've had a lot of people ex-defence on the show, and we talk about the same thing, you know, like personally, if I'm defending my country and I come back and I'm not getting the support that I need, well, hang on a minute. I've done all my bit over there to help you. I need some help here. Yeah. So there is a massive gap there somewhere, which, you know, how do we fix that? It's
well, you know, as much as a lot of royal commissions over the years in Australia have been toothless tigers and stuff, you know, like I don't know, you know, I'm not familiar enough with where we're at in relation to the, you know, government implementing the 120 odd recommendations from the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, but you'd want to hope that, you know, some real change comes out of it.
Definitely.
Mate, I think that's probably a nice little segue into what.
Look at you go with your segues.
Segues. I know big.
How
words.
long have you been dying? How long have you been sitting there dying to get that out?
No, just then, because I thought of your Churchill Fellowship.
I'm going to Google it.
Because you're talking about
what the word segue. It's not something you ride, mate.
Yeah, it's a scooter.
That's what I thought. I thought I'd never seen him on a Segway.
And you will never see me on a Segway.
Oh, Mark Mcconville, he's the leader of the Segway gang.
Yeah. No, he's
not the e-bikes, Segway.
Sorry, Josh. Sorry, mate.
I was hoping you could tell us about, we're talking about the gap and private organisations picking up the pieces. You were saying to me offline something about Churchill Fellowship potentially.
Yeah.
And what does that entail, and what, if you are lucky enough to get it, what are you looking at?
So for those that don't know, the Winston Churchill Trust funds individuals to the deal is that you've got to find something that's happening overseas or in another country that is not happening in your own country. And you go overseas and you learn these skills, knowledge, gain, you know, whatever it is that you can ascertain and information from overseas where something positive is happening, and then you bring that back to the benefit of your own country, right? And so for me, and this circles back to what we were talking about right at the start when I said jokingly about going to a comedy club and getting Medicare to refund your ticket, right? So there's 25 countries around the world that do a thing called social prescribing, right? And it's big in the UK, is the world leader. So, and we are doing this to a certain extent in Australia, but just in little silos. So basically my my Churchill Fellowship application centred around going to the United States, where there's an organisation over there called 1 Degree of Separation, and they use comedians to do suicide prevention training for the US military, and they are fantastic at it. That's a really interesting program. And then zip up to Canada, where there's a guy up there doing stand-up for mental health, where he teaches stand-up comedy to people with mental illness. And Canada is also a country that is big on social prescribing. But the UK is the big ticket item, so 4 weeks in the UK. So basically to use it as a benchmark, in the UK at the moment, they've got 9 million people on antidepressants, right? And you've got politicians who are also GPs over there that have gone, enough's enough.
Mm-hmm.
So now instead of GPs reaching for the prescription pad to put you on antidepressants, they go, well, let's look at, before we go putting you on antidepressants, let's look at your life as a whole and put you in touch with a link worker, and then they can go, okay, so what have you liked to do in the past? What is your life? Do you like artwork? Do you like music? Do you like dance? Do you like comedy? Do you like hiking? Do you like kayaking? Do you like going to the beach? What is it that socially attracts you, right? And so right now, and do that first as a first port of call before putting you on medications, right? And so right now in the UK, you can get comedy on prescription, go to comedy or do a comedy course, and it's subsidised under the NHS, the National Health Service, right? And so my goal is to go over to the States, Canada and the UK to find a way to bring this model back to Australia at a time when last year the federal government commissioned a feasibility study into building a social prescribing network in Australia, a national framework, excuse me, because it is happening in silos, in little bits and pieces, primary health networks around the country, but there's no one system in our country. So, and this is a bit of a frustrating thing for me at the moment. So the Victorian University bring out their feasibility study into social prescribing in Australia, 90-odd page document. Fantastic document. It's got all of the details in relation to where it's happening around the world, what the return on investment is, what it looks like, what are the categories, so comedy would fall under the arts, heritage and culture category. And it even maps out what building a framework would look like. So that was released in November. And then in March of this year, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, which is the peak body for doctors in our country, come out and have a statement about social prescribing is a must-have, not a nice-to-have, for if we're serious about preventative health in our country. And they implored all levels of government to support social prescribing. And then, so that's from the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, right? So you think to yourself, well, that's pretty, that's pretty big. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, the federal government releases their national budget, and in all of the budget papers and all the funding and all that sort of stuff, there is not one mention of social prescribing. There's no reference to the feasibility study. There's no mention of the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners talking about social prescribing. Like the government did offer significant funding in mental health. It's not like they didn't. They didn't, unfortunately, commit to ongoing funding for the National Suicide Prevention Strategy, which is something that I'm a member of Suicide Prevention Australia, so they're advocating for that at a national level. But it was crickets, nothing from the federal government in relation to it. And then you go, oh, that's disappointing. And then, well, to me, what's even more disappointing is a couple of days later, the College of General Practitioners releases their response to the federal government's budget. So most big organisations, the transport, everyone, this is our response to the federal government's budget, right? And so they released a 9-page document as a response to the budget, and they didn't mention that the government didn't mention it in relation to social prescribing. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. 6 weeks ago, you guys were advocating that this is a must-have, and now the government hasn't allocated 1 cent to it, hasn't even referenced a feasibility study, and you're not
being called out.
And you're not being called, and you're not calling them out on it. And advocacy works when it's got to be consistent. So my application was in. I'm very fortunate. I got shortlisted for an interview. So I've got my interview for my Churchill Fellowship application on the 19th of this month. And And if I'm fortunate enough to be offered a Churchill Fellowship, I go to Canberra for a couple of days in October for an onboarding conference. And then I've got between November this year and I think it's February 2028 to do my trip. And basically the fellowship pays for the whole trip. You know, they pay for all the airfares, accommodation, food, all that sort of stuff. And it's an 8-week trip, you know, and it could be quite a game changer for myself, my career, and not only for me, because then I come back and I can find a way of replicating this model in the UK because they're doing it. They're doing it over there right now. Social prescribing, and the UK and Canada are doing it, and we need to be doing it in this country. Our mental health system is buckling under pressure. If we want to talk about, look at what we were saying before about the cost of mental ill health to the federal economy, if you want to make it about money, but like we've got, I think it's about 60% of the Australian population doesn't seek professional mental health treatments purely because of cost, and so we're in a position right now in our country where we need to do better, we really do need to do better. And so if me going over there and finding a way to bring that information back and present it helps push that barrow to get a national social prescribing framework in place and get people to subsidise going to do comedy, going to art classes, going to music classes, all that sort of stuff before putting them on medication. Like I'm not down on medication.
No,
like I've had my own fair share of time on antidepressants and I know they serve their purpose. I'll never be 100% against it, right? But I'm just saying there's other ways. There's other ways to do it.
It's more tools in the toolbox.
100%. So I'm really excited at the fact that I got an interview, and I'm hopeful that I can, state my case well enough in the interview to be offered a fellowship and go and do the trip and come back and I'm lucky that I've got Griffith University. I'm an adjunct lecturer at Griffith Uni where I studied. So Luke Bayliss, who's one of the research fellows there, already said, he'd support me in relation to helping present the data that I bring back and that sort of stuff. And, Suicide Prevention Australia, I already speak at a lot of these conferences now. So, it could be huge. The only thing is, for me personally, is that I can't work that time. So, like, I'm not, it's 8 weeks where I'm not earning any money, but I'm on a hell of a trip that they're paying for, and I could bring back some really cool information that could be good for the general population. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, very.
It's pretty exciting.
I just hope that all goes ahead and that someone listens and,
Well, I'm not the only one. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of people swimming around different parts of the same ocean.
Yeah.
Like you've got Aspire, the organisation Aspire, which is, we love our acronyms, Australian Social Prescribing Institute for Research and Education.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, there we go. And the Paul Ramsay Foundation has funded a study in the Northern Beaches of New South Wales. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars over a couple of years to investigate the effects of social prescribing for patients in aged care facilities and that sort of stuff. So it's happening in silos around our country, but we need a national framework.
Yeah.
Consistency across the country.
Yeah. Because our health system, you don't want to be putting the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and you don't want to put the ambulance at the top of the cliff. You want to put the ambulance 500 metres away from the cliff. So people aren't even walking towards it in the first place.
Yeah, prevention,
early intervention. Yeah, and and around the world, that's the what they call a primary healthcare model, is keeping the population healthy in the first place. Is where you get the biggest bang for your buck.
Well, look at the knock-on effect that mental health has. You can flick the TV on any time of the day and you'll see some tragedy connected with mental health. Not always, but
Mm.
majority of the time it's connected to mental health. Someone's not getting the care they need. Domestic violence cases are going through the roof.
It's horrible. It's so bad. And I really feel for like our police that, because I know I've talked to numerous police officers over the years that have said to me they don't want to do it. Like it's a volatile situation that is an unknown environment, highly emotional, unknown weapons, drugs, whatever. And I really do acknowledge the fact that is one of the hardest things.
And right at the start of the podcast, we talked about growing up where we grew up. How often would you have heard of these situations happening? You might be lucky, and if you did hear about it, you'd be going, what the? Now it's every day we hear about it.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's because news networks you're filling up our phones and whatever, it's more accessible, but living where we lived in, not just our area, but a lot of areas, you never heard of it. And now it's just every day.
So I'm curious to know, and I got a question for you guys. So one of the things that
Is this our podcast or is it?
Yeah. One of the things I talk about doing the mental health presentation is I advise people to minimise their news input. Because it's so bad, it's so doom and gloom. And when I run people through the Humour and Laughter Education program, one of the things is to replace your news with comedy or monitor how much news you're bringing in, because this whole thing about having it on the TV when you get ready for work and listen to it in the car and then an hour of news in the current affair at night. Like, hand on heart, I've gone and the last time I watched a half-hour news bulletin was COVID.
Yep.
Right, I got sucked in like everybody else, right? And so I'm a big advocate for not watching it, not being ignorant of what's happening. I get my news in the car on the radio. It's a couple of minutes. It's local. There's no visuals. I read the headlines in the newspaper when I'm getting fuel, or on social media, you're going to find something, right? So for you guys who are out there at the front line, what do you have in relation to your degree of news input? Because I would imagine you guys being totally not watching the news.
I don't watch it. I don't consume any news whatsoever for that reason.
Yeah.
The same reasons that you said. It's just there's nothing healthy on it, and it was probably around the COVID era too that I stopped.
Yeah.
I turned it all off, and I just thought none of this is within my control anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't actually need to know it, and it's all negative. Majority of it was negative, so I just turned it off. And to be honest, I don't miss not knowing what's on it.
See, that's the thing is, do I think it's an absolute tragedy what's happening in other parts of the world and the what is going on, the wars and of course I do. It's horrible. But if you're susceptible to anxiety and depression and that sort of stuff, having that information on a daily basis does not help.
I mean, some of those wars overseas have been going on since the dawn of time. And growing up, I never knew what was going on in Iran or anything. But now they are literally living. It feels like they're living that close to us because we're getting that input of news every day of what's happening over there and
how's it affecting us. And
yeah. And I mean, no one wants to see kids in the street suffering in those war-torn countries. That's there's that whole aspect of vicarious trauma and
absolutely 100% vicarious trauma.
So it's
because you can't do anything about it.
No,
yeah, that is a big thing, isn't it?
Crazy times.
Yeah,
crazy.
Well, I take my hat off to you guys and all you guys that are listening. It's a whenever I'm doing presentations or whatever for first responders and defence, you hear that term, thank you for your service a lot, but I honestly acknowledge the toll that service can take, but not only on yourselves, but on your immediate family, because it is something that your family shares the burden of service.
Definitely.
They really do.
Definitely.
Thank you, mate. Just quickly, I'm mindful of time. Can we have a quick chat about the Laughter Clinic?
Sure.
We've mentioned it around about a number of times, but what is it? How does it work? And how do we tap into it?
Okay, so it's a series of keynote presentations that I do, and it can be customised for whoever the audience is. And basically, it starts with me coming out. I tell a story about how it is that a comedian came to do this kind of work, and then we zero in on self-care. Sometimes depending on who the audience is, sometimes they'll want I can do some suicide prevention stuff in there and all of that because I've got that knowledge through that training. But self-care is where I spend a lot of the time in these presentations, and talking about things like what I call the feel-good 5, so like what makes you happy, what are you looking forward to, what are you grateful for, what's your me time, and what makes you laugh, what's made you laugh recently. And so it's very interactive. It's not just me standing in front of an audience talking at them. I go out into the audience. Hey, Jason, stand up. How you going? Tell us 5 things that have made you happy over your life. Tell us 3 things that you're looking forward to. What are you looking forward to, Josh, in the next 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, that sort of stuff? What's your me time? When you switch off, what are you doing, to recalibrate and just, come back to center? So we spend a lot of time in that, and then in the middle of the presentation, I do some stand-up. Right, be remiss of me not to tell them some jokes. So I get everyone laughing. I take off the mental health hat and I put on the comedian hat, and I go, now let's have a laugh, right? And depending on how much time I've got, the presentations usually run for between an hour and a half. I can give them anywhere from 5 to 10, 15 minutes of stand-up in the middle of the presentation, and then after that, I just go, now let's pause and just sit and see how you're feeling right now after just having had a laugh for a bit. And that's where I unpack the whole physically, this is what's happening to you. Psychologically, this is why your sense of humour is important. Socially, social health, connectedness with everyone. And so go into the health benefits of humour and laughter from a physical, mental health and social health aspect. And then I finish it up with giving you some tools in relation to what is it that makes you laugh? How do you bring more laughter into your life? How do you bring more laughter into the lives of those around you? So, zeroing in on, like we spoke about before, who is it in your life that you share your sense of humour with? What is it? What does that relationship look like? What comedians do you like? What sort of humour do you like? Why? When I'm talking to first responders and defence personnel, I talk about the fact that your sense of humour is your biggest coping mechanism, you know what I mean? And there's so much research to support it, lots of research to support self-enhancing humour. High score on that reduces symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, increased quality of life satisfaction, all of those things. Building a laughter library on your mobile phone, you open up YouTube, create a playlist, call it your laughter library. You don't know how to create a playlist on YouTube, ask a 10-year-old, they'll do it. And then go searching, for different comedians or, different shows or different clips or cats playing the piano, AI dogs on surfboards or whatever, and chuck them all in your laughter library. And then you've got access to, content that you've chosen for yourself that you find funny, so you're in between jobs, having a stressful day, I can't get something out of my head or whatever, you open up, there's a 10-minute Billy Connolly clip. I've got time to watch that, or, you're with someone else and that they're going to like something. You go, that was pretty full on. What do you, here's Robin Williams talking about golf for 5 minutes. Hilarious, And then I usually finish up with a Q&A because, there's usually questions. Most of the time it's, who's your favourite comedian, or tell us a time when you died of the arse on stage. But, I'm happy to answer any questions. And so I travel around doing that. Sometimes it's the full laughter clinic presentation, as I just said it, and sometimes people, depending on the client, they'll go, can you zone in on the suicide prevention? Can you zone in on the self-care? Can we have more of the humour and laughter stuff, And it just depends on who the client is and what it is that they want. Like big mining companies, they want everything. Councils, a lot of the time, like recently I went down to Sydney and I did a heap of gigs people after clinics for the Canterbury Bankstown Council, and they said, we want you to speak to every single person on our payroll. So I did, I think it was 7 presentations over 2 days and got to speak to 1,540 people.
Wow.
You know, but everyone got it.
Mm.
So then you know then that the organisation as a whole has got the information and the resources to start to implement things like we're talking about leadership and that sort of stuff. And, you know, and to me it's all about education, because you don't know what you don't know. You know, some presentations I talk about what are warning signs, you know, for people that may be, you know, in suicidal distress. What are things to look out for? Like I said, it's education to me. You don't know what you don't know.
Can you, while we're talking about that, can you give us some of those signs?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I choose these three very particular reason, because they're the easiest to remember, easiest to recognise, and easiest for you to do something about. So hopelessness, isolation, and burdensomeness are the 3 big ones. So hopelessness, you know, I've got nothing to look forward to in my life, mate. Everything's shit. I don't even know why I bother. What am I even doing here, right? That's that person struggling if they're in that headspace and not having anything to look forward to, you know, because we've all got things to look forward to when you think about it. And future thinking is very important for your mental health, even if it's just walking the dog on the weekend or catching up with your mates or a dinner that you're having with anything. The last episode of Married at First Sight, when will that shit be over? You know what I'm talking, like anything, right? So hopelessness is a big one. Isolation. Now, the thing about isolation is, and this is why suicide prevention is so complex, it is so complicated. So when I'm talking about isolation, like, yes, being isolated in rural areas and, you know, is a risk factor when you're out on the land and that sort of stuff. But I'm talking here about emotionally isolating yourself, right, from friends, family, shutting everyone out, pushing everyone away. But what makes it complicated is you could get someone who has, for the last couple of years, felt down, despondent, been very depressed for the last couple of years. You know, you've noticed that they've not themselves for a couple of years and they're really in a bad way. And then out of the blue, they're all right, you know. And you go, wow, what's happened to them? They've really turned a corner, you know, and they're catching up with everybody, you know, they're in a good mood. They're, you know, they're the polar opposite of where they were a month ago. And we know that that can be the case because that person has resigned themselves to the fact that they're not going to be here.
Okay.
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right.
So they're going to go and say goodbye to everybody. They're not literally saying goodbye to everybody. But that's out of character, you know, and it's about being aware, having an awareness of the people in your life and where they're at, you know. And so if you've got someone that has been sad for a couple of years and then like a light switch has been flicked and all of a sudden overnight they're great, why? Why are they great? You know? I'm not saying that's 100% always the case, but it's complicated, you know, and that's something to look out for. And so it's that awareness of being aware of the people in your life and where they're at. And the other one is burdensomeness, which is the big ticket item, and it's the one that doesn't get spoken about enough. So I'm going to be very specific here. So if you hear someone say, my friends and family would be better off without me around, right? That's a big ticket item because we know, like, you know, I've felt that way in my deepest depression. Lucky for me, I never enacted upon it, but I know what that feels like because you honestly believe that for whatever reason you've hurt too many people around you and everyone's going to benefit from you not being here. And they will never, ever, ever benefit, right? It will never benefit anybody. So because we know that burdensomeness is a big driver to go from intent to action, right? And, there's a few myths about suicide that, the big one is that you don't ask someone that if they're thinking about harming themselves or having suicidal thoughts. And for a long time, that was the protocol because, it was like you're going to put the idea in their head, you're going to give them something to think about that they hadn't already thought. And we now know that to be wrong, right? We know it to be wrong because we've listened to the voice of lived experience, right? But it takes courage to ask that question. This is the next step beyond "Are you okay?" Which is a fantastic initiative. But it's a big difference between saying to someone, "Are you okay? How you going?" And are you thinking about suicide? Have you had suicidal thoughts? Have you made a plan to harm yourself? And I think people may be worried about other people in their life and they feel ill-equipped to ask that question because, well, what do I do if the answer comes back, well, yes, actually I have been having those thoughts, And so my advice to anybody that may be contemplating asking that question, going beyond "Are you okay?" with someone, is do yourself a favour and get a little bit educated before going into that conversation. And we are so lucky that there are so many free resources out there. You can go to the Lifeline website, Beyond Blue, Are You OK Day website. There's a really great one called Conversations Matter, and all of them will give you helpful information on how do you have this conversation with an adolescent, how do you have this conversation with a parent, with a co-worker, with a next-door neighbour, and a lot of it is understanding that it's important to just sit sometimes with someone and listen without judgment, and
just be present.
Just be present and sit with them amongst their mess, and and a lot of the time it's pretty powerful saying to someone, what is it that you need right now? What is it that you need? Do you need me to just sit here and listen? Do you need me to try and help you figure something out? Would going to the beach and putting your feet in the ocean be something? Would listening to your favourite music, what is it that will help right now to help you? Because it will pass, and that's the thing is it's the most tragic of all things, suicide. It really is that people get to the point where they feel as though they don't have any option, and whatever it is they're going through, it will pass.
I'd love to see us get better at exactly what you're talking about. The amount of times you hear in the aftermath of it, people saying, I never read the signs, I never picked it up, I should have just rung and but I wonder if there's also that reluctancy of, like you say, tiptoeing around that conversation. That's a tough conversation to have. But if we were given some skill sets and or skills to navigate our way through that conversation, and I know the power of that, what you just said about what do you need? Now, I had a mate when I was going through a bit of a hard time, and he just said, what do you want from me? Do you want me to ring you every day? Do you want me to ring you once a week? Tell me what you want and I will do that. And to me, that's a good mate.
That's a good friend to have that awareness to ask.
Well, it just felt my whole world had opened up to go, you know what, I know that I've got him there regardless. If I want to hear from him every day, I know he's in my safety net, I've got him. Or if I need him once a week. And I just thought that was so simple, because he often jokes to me and says, I'll never be a good PSO. I'm hopeless. I just don't have the empathy. He does.
Yeah.
He really does.
Well, clearly he has.
Yeah. And that to me, I still think about the power of those words every time I'm sort of in that spot. I go, you know what, I wish I had to come up with that when I had conversations with people. Because there's conversations I have, you go, I don't even know what to say here. This is, but often we don't need to say anything. But
Yeah.
I'd like to see leaders, we talked about that early offline, about giving leaders toolboxes to say, these are the conversations you need to have, and this is how you articulate those conversations, because it's game changer for me, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh yeah, and just on that, how many times do you hear when someone loses a loved one to suicide, they go, "We had no idea."
Yeah.
It happened out of the blue.
Yep.
And we know now through years of working on this that it doesn't happen out of the blue.
No.
It's so complicated. There's warning signs, there's risk factors, there's protective factors, there's so much going on. The impact of negative life events compounding, but you're not expected to know what you don't know. And there's a thing called a psychological autopsy where, you can go back and look at the circumstances of that person's life leading up to the suicide. And then you can go, well, this happened and that happened and this happened and they were in this stress and they were dealing with this conflict in their life or whatever, and so, yeah, having that awareness, I'm so glad that you had that friend of yours that did that, Chase. That's very cool.
I'll always, every time I see him, I appreciate, it just worked for me at that time. It was what I needed, exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
but on the flip side of that as well, we had a guest in. He talks, and it's a great story, and I won't drag the story out, but it was basically a young boy sitting on in a mall, and an old teacher walks past, notices him, goes over and says, "Hey, you're Johnny Smith from such and such high school." Yeah. Wow, long time no see. What are you doing? And you were my favourite student. I loved you as a student. You were always funny. You really brightened up the class. As the story pans out, that guy was committing suicide that day. That conversation changed that.
Wow.
All of a sudden he got some self-worth and went, you know what? Okay, that's coming from a teacher of mine, and whatever that reason is. I just think that's such a beautiful story on how a conversation, exactly what we're having today, can just change someone's mindset to go, okay, just pump the brakes for a minute. It's not too bad. I can get through this. And you said the thing perfectly, which it's everything passes. Nothing's permanent. It will pass. It's just getting to that, and with stuff that you're doing, sadly enough, I know that someone's going to hear this podcast and we're going to sadden the way that they're in that position is what I'm getting at. But I think they're going to hear something that resonates and goes, okay, I've got to shift. I've got to make change, or I've got to, there is a big light at the end of the tunnel. So,
yeah, well, that's it. And, I applaud you guys for putting the podcast together because, I know that it's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. I mean, seriously, if you could see how many cables are on this floor.
You witnessed it firsthand.
Seriously, and because you never know.
Yeah.
Like I said before about comedians, you never know who's in your audience. You never know, and I've had it said to me a couple of times when I've come back from doing things where I've had fellow people from uni say, you'll never know how many people that you have benefited from because, and it's not only someone listening, even if like what we were saying, someone listening, maybe not for themselves, but, they in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time, they recognise something in someone else and hear that, that sentence, my friends and family would be better off without me around, and they go, hang on a minute, what did that guy say?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And so we're in a fortunate position that, modern technology enables us to do this stuff, and get as much information out there as what you can, because when I love doing it live, like I love being in front of an audience and having that connection and all that sort of stuff and doing it for you guys, first responders and defence, and going out to, rural, I've been to Charleville and Quilpie and Thargomindah and you name it, and it's pretty rewarding, because it's you don't know what people are going through. Everyone's fighting a battle that you don't know where they're at, So just be kind, be kind.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself and be kind to those around you. And that's the whole self-care thing is, like a lot of mental health speakers use the analogy of the oxygen mask, on the plane. Put it on yourself first before helping others because you can't help anyone if you're suffocating, And so it's not being selfish. It's not narcissistic. You've got a duty of care to be looking after yourself, first and foremost, because otherwise if you don't, the people around you that, might fall in a heap and look to you for support or help, you're not going to be much use to them if you've let yourself crumble,
True. Very true.
Good. Too good, mate.
Too good?
Too good.
Too good, people.
Just quickly, I want to know one thing.
Oh, no, here we go.
What makes you laugh, or what do you find funny, and who is your all-time favourite comedian? If it's comedy that makes you laugh, of course.
Yeah. Mate, look, I'm so lucky that I'm mates with some of the funniest guys in the country. It's such a – I get asked this question a lot, and back in the day it was, Eddie Murphy's Delirious, which I still find funny. And if anyone knows who I'm talking about, the old Derek and Clive tapes, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, I love that stuff. But nowadays, I'm a massive fan of Jim Jeffries. I think Jim's doing incredible work. Same with Ricky Gervais. I think Ricky Gervais is one of the very clever comic. Dave Chappelle, but then internationally, and obviously you've got the ones that go without saying, the Billy Connollys, Robin Williams, and Jerry Seinfeld. I recently watched every Seinfeld episode again, the whole, and like the whole box set, and it's like the third or fourth time I've watched the whole stuff, and I still laugh. Family Guy, oh my God, I'm addicted to that, It's just, stupid stuff. But then, and then I'll go to work and I'll be working with 2 or 3 other comics and I'll just sit and watch them and I'll just go, how nice is it to – I love sitting sitting at the back of the room and watching one of my mates up there light them up. I love it.
Nice.
I absolutely love it. So and I got to tell you, I know we're down. A lot of people are down on AI, right? And it's that's a whole other conversation, right? But man, there's some funny shit that I've been seeing. I've been seeing some funny shit. And I'm thinking, who thinks of this stuff? Like I gotta stop on the Instagram reels, because I mean seriously, cats and dogs. Yes. I saw one last night. There's a and it's always funny that they do cats and dogs imitating a video that is kind of going viral or something. So there'll be like, dudes doing cooking street food in Japan or something, and they're showing some dude making a 3-minute fried rice, and the next meme it's a cat doing it. Right? And I know it's stupid. It's stupid, but
funny.
It is funny, right? And so I find some pretty ridiculous shit funny, mate.
It's good.
Yeah. Oh.
Good chat.
Really, yeah.
Thanks
Great
so
chat.
much
Good.
for having me on, you boys. I really appreciate it. It's been great catching up.
Yeah,
Thank you,
definitely.
And we're doing some stuff with Buddy Up, which is going to be pretty exciting,
Yeah,
mate. I'm really looking
look
forward
forward
to
to that.
getting involved with you guys with that. So,
That'll be good.
yeah.
Be really good. Mate, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming up and have a chat to us. And as we said before, surely there's someone or some people out there who are going to take something out of this for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
And if anyone's interested, they want to reach out, pretty easy to find. Just Google the Laughter Clinic, Mark Mcconville. There's, a website there. It's got a heap of information on it, podcast, YouTube channel, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, you need anything, just reach out.
Definitely, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, mate.
Good on you guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by subscribing, liking and rating the podcast on your listening and social media platforms. We are always looking to improve what we do. If you have feedback, suggestions for further guests, topics, or would like to be a guest yourself, please contact us via Instagram.